Welcome everyone to Her Story Unscripted. I am so excited for this conversation today. I have Dr. Shola on. We just met, I guess it was last month in a Sonoma County Women's Professional group. I actually had the pleasure of speaking and, I kind of came at the conversation of like how you build relationships and, some tips and tricks. But you like instantly came over to me after speaking and your energy and your excitement and like that immediate connection that you wanted to have with me. I was like, my heart was so full, and you're actually one of the most memorable people that I like interacted with that day. So thank you for being here. I cannot wait to have this conversation.
Heather, thank you so much. Honestly, I think I go for places. I think for you, I could sense the authenticity in what you wanted to do for women. I've been in corporate for how many years? And sometimes, when people are putting up that fakeness, for the show. But for you, you spoke from your heart and I could sense it. And I said, you know what? I wanted to connect with her because again, you're warm, people love warm, authentic, people, and you were ready there to serve. So, I will say, Heather, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for making me on your podcast. And I'm hoping, part of this can be things we can share with, the broader, community, not only Sonoma County women professional, but just, worldwide, globally. And I hope, your podcast, continues to blow and continues to inspire women and empower women and just making them know they're not alone in that space of what they're thinking.
It's
So
so true. Like everything you said is like my why behind my podcast. That's when I knew like I would have conversations with women, and I just knew that I had something in me that I had to like have this platform. And I think right now is more important than ever for women to start speaking up and to telling their stories and motivating other women to rise up, because I think I got chills because it's like we are so much more powerful together. And like how do we lean on each other to learn, to inspire, to connect. So I think there's like so much important things about us women telling our story and our journeys, and so I can't wait to dive in. And I know all of my stories are very dynamic and different, which is what I love. But what I love about this conversation today is your career and, a woman moving through in higher positions. But
mhm.
probably I have a feeling based on what I know, you get to a point where you feel stuck or you hit a ceiling or you're not happy anymore. And how do you take the initiative to like do something different and do something bigger, and something that is true to your heart? So I think this will be a conversation that's going to resonate so with so many women.
I think, Heather, you are, because I think, in life we have journeys and you have phases in your life. You have, your I want to take women back. You have when you're in high school, what's your dream? You go into, the next thing is you want to get married, isn't it? You want to have kids, then you want to have your career. And then you have to balance between having your career and raising the kids up, just trying to do that. And then if you're a very ambitious woman, you want to climb up, up, the ladder, and you're doing that and it's pulling on you onto part of your authenticity, and then you reach a point where you're stuck. When I say stuck is like you realize within where you're at you can go further, and it's time where you start having those conversations, internally with your heart. And it's not easy. I think, when you're a mother, you have a family, you have responsibility. You can't just, pull the trigger. You gotta it is, and there's no right or wrong.
Mhm.
That's what and you can't feel that, what, you are doing yourself less. But when you become, I think one thing I always say, when you become a mother, it's no longer about you anymore. You have to think about the broader community, and the broader community is your family.
Mhm.
That will come first. You're trying to protect them, trying to preserve them, and then your career, and you kind of have that conflict of, what do how do you navigate it. But I think, I will say where I am right now, it was meant to be. It
Mhm.
was, sometimes the universe, I don't want to say the universe, the Almighty, because I'm a woman of faith, you know, the Almighty, your creator tells you, it's time for you to pivot. It's time for you to do something. And sometimes you might be a hard head, not listening.
Yeah.
Something happens to you, and then you have to start, reinventing yourself. And it's uncomfortable. But you know what they say, Heather? Growth happens when you're uncomfortable because you push yourself in things you will not normally do. In that sense. So I think that's going to be the less, one of the advice I'll give to women. It's, sometimes we're kind of just so stuck in the routine, the safety, the security. And I want to say that it's not wrong. It is just how we're wired. But you're going to find out you reach a certain point in your life and you realize you want more.
Hmm.
You want to challenge the status quo. It's you want to be doing things when you're in your authentic self, that you're not just you're just not working for. I want to say, and I'm trying to be really poised in what I say, in the sense that you're being your true authentic self. You're being free. You're being creative. You're not put in the box of where an organization is telling you what to do. And I'm saying there's no wrong in that. But it's about growth. When you're 25, when you're 30, yes, it's fine. But when you start reaching, your 50s, you have wisdom,
Yeah.
you have experience. And then you start asking yourself those things you thought, you know, made sense. And it made sense back then. But it's all about, I think, evolvement to
Hmm.
your higher self is meant to be. So I think that's for me, that's where I am right now. And it's, there's no right or wrong. You have to go through that journey and you're going to see yourself. You're going to come to that point where you're going to think about, is this serving my higher purpose? Is this serving my higher good? Um, and your body's gonna your body's gonna tell you, your mind is gonna tell you in that sense. So I think, for women, it's when you get to the point, just be open, lean into it. And you're not gonna have one thing I will say, it's not gonna be a book. There's not gonna be a script, Heather.
Hmm.
Open to the unknown. Because I think for us women, and I always say, I tell people, because as a leader, 80% we need structure, 20% we need, we have, it's open, we can draw however you want to do. But I think we live our life in most parts in the structure piece. And I
Hmm.
think when you're trying to invent yourself, it's going to be no structure. It's going to be, you're going to have to be open. You're going to have to be open to all the possibilities, try new things, and they're going to be uncomfortable. And sometimes you're going to ask yourself, it's like, what am I doing? You know,
Hmm.
and sometimes you're going to think, what, I should have been in the security I had, your 9 to 5 job. No, it is. But you're going to see there's going to be a lot of beauty in, opening yourself, learning new things, going out of your comfort zone. But I think for me, that's the beauty of where I am right now. It is versus, the structure, the true, the tried, and the tested. And you have to be comfortable with that. And that's where growth happens.
Absolutely. Oh, I can resonate. I have so many notes that I took during that because it's so true. I even think like lately I've been feeling like stuck, not necessarily stuck in like the direction that I want my career to go, but just kind of like my day-to-day thing. And I am like, because I am very structured, like I'm very routine, like I have my checklist every day. I got to do the things. And I'm feeling like not happy with that. Like it's not sitting well with me. And so I'm like, okay, I need to shake things up. I need to do something different, whether that's like, I just reached out to a new gym. And so maybe like incorporating a gym thing in the morning or just something because it just gets so repeat, repeat, repeat. And it's fine because you're moving forward, but it's almost like boring and it's not fun anymore and it's not exciting. And so and everyone always says to me, you've always just changed. Like you're always like into new things or you're trying new things because you get to a point where you feel stuck and you just want to keep trying and doing more and like and finding your joy in that.
So one thing I will say, it's, a lot of women feel stuck because we feel we have to be doing everything all over.
Yeah.
We need to be like super women. It is. It's like you got to take the kids, drop them in school, I gotta be at the bake sale. I gotta do this. I gotta be. And I think something we don't realize, and I'll tell you, Heather, I was speaking to my sister. She's my youngest sister. She's out there in Canada, Calgary, Canada. I always call her, she's my smart one, very strategic. And we we're talking, I'm one of five girls. We're six in our family. So I have a sisterhood. And it's like we talk through life itself, and they're all professional. And part of the things I've noticed is we all want to be perfect. We want everything to look in the picture perfect. And sometimes, Heather, as I get older, I always admire the women that, they say, I'll leave it on my own terms. Because you know what? You are not living for the gallery, you're doing it for yourself. And when you end up doing things for yourself, you come at peace. You are not trying to make a show, for people. And I will tell you, the people, your tribe will always love you, regardless. And this is where the things we women, we need to learn. We need to know who our tribe is. And your tribe, regardless of if you're a man, if you're a bitch, if you're anything, they know that is who you are, and they will accept you for who you are. But in most cases, I see us as women as pleasers. We always want to be liked. It is. And sometimes the likeness is to our disservice, because it might just be the people that are not going to be reciprocal to us in that likeness, in what we're doing. And this is where we need to have that sense to know who your tribe is. It's not being nice, it's being kind. Kindness is different from niceness, and also not letting to be a pushover. Because when people are going to come to you, if they know you're too nice, they'll come with crap to you. But once they know that, I got to come straight to Heather, I can't come with, excuse my language, I can't come with bullshit to Heather. I can't come with fakeness to Heather, because Heather's going to call me out on that shit.
Yep.
And I think it's for us, and you're going to have friends that are, what? They would treat you because you have the same values. They have the same respect. You understand? They're being mindful. They're being thoughtful. And those are kind of going to be easier people to work with. But I think that's the one thing I realize for us as women is how we have to make sure that you got to be your authentic self, and sometimes you're going to have to be I'm sorry to say, you're going to have to be a bitch.
I'm learning. That is hard for me because I'm not. And I need to be, though, because I've let people step on the boundaries. And like, you need to have the boundaries, and you need to be like, no, like, not okay. No, I'm not doing this.
No, it is. And I think, you're going to find folks that are, and I always say in life, you have to have that ability to see who are the takers and who are the givers. And, if you're a giver, you're going to find out people are always going to take from you. And you're going to get to a point. I got that point where I was always giving, and get to a point where you realize it's like, I'm always giving, who's filling my cup? And you get to a certain age, I will say that, where you self-reflect and you do an evaluation on your life, Heather, and you realize, what?
Some people got to go.
It is. And that's because you know what, Heather? I always say there's a season.
Yep.
It's like a book. There are chapters. And everybody comes to your life for a season, isn't it? You learn from them, they learn from you. And sometimes you grow. And either both of you grow together, or you are growing and the other person is still stuck in there. And you have to realize it's okay. It doesn't mean you don't love them less. But you just know what I think what your higher being is calling, it's calling for, isn't it? It's like in marriages, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't want to bring it's like in marriages, a relationship, people get, they get married, they're in love, you think it's forever, and then people grow, and, you go on different paths, and it's okay. Doesn't mean you love the person less. But it's just, right now, either that person is not it's not serving your higher purpose, your higher good, isn't it? And
Right.
I think at the end of the day, we always want to be better. For me, I always want to be better than yesterday, and not just be, as my father will say, don't rest on your laurels.
So good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you always had this mindset? Because I think that as we go through life, obviously we get stronger, as you were mentioning, like the older we get, the more wise we get, the more experience we have, the more we don't want to take bullshit. But have
Mm-hmm.
you always had this like mindset, or did something happen through your journey of your career or your everyday life that kind of made you like more aware and to do more personal development and to like see things in a different light?
So I think, for me, I'd been aware, and I think one of the person I'd been aware was my mom. My mother has been someone, when I was growing up, my mom was a she was a leader. She was just firm. She was someone that didn't take. She always wanted people to deal with her straight. It's you come straight, I'll deal with you straight. You don't come straight, then I kind of have to. So I learned that a little bit from my mom. But I'll tell you, I wasn't this kind of person. I will tell you in my teen years, in my my early years, I was like, as nicer. You always wanted to be liked. You wanted to get along with everybody. It's a lot of things. But then as you walk your way through your career, through different lives, and you have to grow. I've taken leadership classes, and those are part of the things that I want to say, have emboldened me, honestly. And when you take women leadership classes, I always recommend women take that,
Mm,
because it ends up, it's not just, it ends up emboldening you on how to navigate this life, situations itself. But I will tell you, Heather, I've been in corporate for going on 20 years. And when I started, I started in clinical. And then you learn when you work with different people, cross-functional people, different, backgrounds, different values, you end up learning how it has to be your voice,
mm,
isn't it?
mhm,
It has to be your voice. And I think when it's your voice has to be something that is not rude, not a jerk. You just have to be assertive. You have to be able to speak up honestly. And sometimes when you speak up, it might not be something that's popular. And that's what
mhm,
leadership is all about. Leadership, I always say, is not a popularity contest. It's not you're being liked. Leadership is, doing, sometimes you will do the fun things, you'll make the decisions for the fun things, and sometimes you'll make the decisions for the hard things. And that's what leadership is all about. And it's also making the clarity for people to have the vision of, where do we need to be going, in that sense. So I wouldn't say I was built like this, but I think, how it is, it's how you're formed through years. It's like you end up, it's like ended up having, I don't want to say those armors that goes with it. So I wasn't like this, but I've learned to just navigating, working with, in organizations and with people, it's your voice is your value, it is, and how you're able to speak up without being, and sometimes you don't have to be thinking about what I say. Sometimes you're going to have to say things that are not palatable in the room, because if you're saying it, someone else is thinking about it.
mhm.
They're just not being bold enough to say it.
What was your experience like? Because you did, you were in the corporate world for a long time,
Mhm.
and you were in leadership. What was your experience like as a woman of color in an industry where you're like very small compared to what the corporate world looks like? What was your experience through that?
I think, Heather, that's a very great question. And I will say being in corporate, and I want to go back to when I first, so just give the audience a little bit of a story about me.
Yeah.
So born and raised in Nigeria, moved out here. So vet by training, practiced for 2 years back then, and then moved to the United States. And I went to grad school in Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And I will say I've always been in the room where I'm the sole Black person. woman of color, in the room. So it is that aspect of performance, you're kind of always going to be, it's not 100%, it's a 200%, where you are. I was the first PhD student, for the program, woman of color. It wasn't easy, but it was just, you put that pressure, a lot of pressure you have on yourself. So when I talk about corporate was the organization I worked for, was a great organization. I will say that. Fantastic organization. I was able to have my career aspirations, through it, walking through the ladder. But I also know there was also that inherent pressure, where they say the performance pressure, where, it's like you're, it's a lack of a better word, Heather, is where you're representing.
Mm.
There are going to be folks where they've never met person of color. First thing, what am I representing? You're representing someone that is what? Is a woman of color. And the next thing is where you're representing. I'm representing Nigeria. Even though I've been in the United States longer than I've been in Nigeria. So those two things, come. And it's part of the things you have when you're raised, where your parents tell you, when you go out, know the home you're coming from.
Mm.
All right. Know the name of your family you're coming from. So when you go out there, you represent us on your best. And I don't know if it's a right or wrong, but it's a lot of pressure
I think
because
it's a beautiful like mindset to go into. Yeah.
it's beautiful. But when you take it for a very long time, it's like that's how I'm always thinking. It's like, how was you raised? What your dad say? Know the home you're coming from. Know the name of the family you're coming from. Don't embarrass us, it's like, I don't know about you, Heather, but that's, back then.
Yeah.
So I think it's part of, those cultures. But I will tell you, for me, one of the things I always say, I always focus on the work. I focus on the performance. I don't focus on the noise. And that's just, how I've been raised. That's what I know. It's the work, what our goals, and how we strive for that. And I think when that becomes your North Star, then you're able to perform without, the noise. I'm not saying the noise is not going to come up, in your alone time, where you're thinking about, I was in this meeting. And it's like, what did that mean? Why
Mm.
wasn't my opinion taken, valued, and someone else just repeat the same thing you say. And they say, it's like, how come my voice wasn't heard? And I think it happens to women, it happens to all of us,
Yep.
I have, regardless of, where you're from, your skin tone, it just happens, it is. So you just don't take that, you just move on. So for me, I will tell you, Heather, I try to focus on, what's the goal, what's our target, and that's my priority.
Mm.
And then, everything becomes on the sideline, because that's a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
It's a distraction. And the distractions are what doesn't make a lot of people accomplish what they need to, you know.
And it's nothing you can do, right? It's their opinion, it's their thoughts. It's like the book from Mel Robbins, like let them have their opinion, let them think a certain way. But we
Yeah.
don't have control over that. But what we do have control is how we react to it and how we continue through it.
No, it is. It is, and I think that is very, very important, regardless of where you are. Honestly, you got to know. And I think it's part of the things they tell you in leadership. What's within your influence? What's out of your influence? Things you can influence, you work on that. What's out of your control? You can't do anything, to that. And if you can't do anything, you either find other people that can influence the situation. I remember I had one of my bosses, love him dearly. And he was one of the best leaders I've had. He wasn't too much in your face, but I will always say, he will tell you, you know what, Shola, what's within your influence? Because sometimes you're trying to put that peg through the circle, and he will tell you, find someone else that is able to influence, the group on what you're saying, either because you're coming on too strong. And, sometimes when you come on too strong, people, even though you're saying it right, they just don't want to listen because of their ego. They think you're trying to push it down there. So find someone else which you can, get on your line and influence them so they can influence, the greater, the broader group. So this is something, I did, learn. It's know what's within your influence and what you have no control over. And you
Right.
got to let things you have no control over so you don't have stress or anxiety.
Mm.
And so it'd be something that women should really think about. And honestly, and I think the other thing, everything is not urgent because, that's a thing that is important and there's urgent. And as women, we think everything has to be done. And sometimes I admire men because they just, they have that thinking of like, they're always looking in the grand scheme. I know you see that,
Yeah.
but it is. It's like sometimes like they're able to look at it and say, okay, what do we need to do in the grand scheme of things? And I think that's one thing I'll encourage us, and I also say that for myself. It's not everything that is urgent that has to be done now, 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 you know?
Yeah.
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 So it is what I will say.
That's so great. So you were in corporate America for, you said 20 plus years.
Going to 20, 18 plus. Yeah.
What was the point? Was it a day? Was it a meeting? Was it a season for you where you're like, I got to get out of this and I got to do something that fills my cup or that I'm passionate about or that that you could make a bigger impact doing the work that you're doing now? Like, what was that moment?
So I think, for me, I wouldn't say it was a moment. It had been building. I will say that. And I think I will say you wanted to cross that threshold. I'm thinking if I'd gotten the next thing I wanted in the organization, probably I'll still be in that organization as of today, honestly. But then again, your soul starts to speak to you. Is this what you want to do? And I think people need to listen to that. It's like you got to start listening to your heart and what your soul is telling you. Do you want to be doing this for the next, you know, 25 years to your retirement? You got to ask yourself that. And sometimes you ask yourself that your soul is telling you something, but you're also thinking about the practicality of stuff, isn't it? So there are two ways you either go. Either one, you leave the organization, or I always say the almighty creator makes some things happen that, they say that, your role, we're restructuring, your role is no longer, needed.
Mhm.
And because again, I will tell you there are two kinds of people. The people that the people that will leave the organization and say, you know what, I don't have anything left. I'm just going to go. I'm going to figure it out. And there are folks that I will tell you, you don't know. Your spirit guide, the Almighty is telling you, I know what you're going through, my child. I know people wouldn't get it, but you always, for me, I believe there's always something that's bigger than us. I
Mhm.
believe there's something bigger than you, and you have to know sometimes it will navigate you on where you need to be. I will say I know over the past couple of years I was realizing I wanted something bigger. I wasn't getting it, in that sense. And I think it's also the freedom. Sometimes you want the freedom to create and not to be stuck in that box. Some people are fine with that, but
Mhm.
if you're creative and you want more, for me, I've always been looking for the next thing. Is like, what's the next stroke? I'm an achiever. I did the 5 strengths fighter. One of it is an achiever. I do it even in my role. I've always been having different roles, just learning. I'm a learner. I always want to learn something different,
Mhm.
in that sense. So, the opportunity came, last year. They were having a restructuring and it worked perfectly, well for me. I will say part of what worked well for me, Heather, was 2 days after I took on a journey to go see my mom
Mhm.
in the UK. And it was like, because what happens is you've been working for so long, you've been working, you didn't have time for yourself, you didn't have time to travel. And I think one of the things I'm going to tell women right now is we're always giving to everybody apart from ourselves.
Yep.
I don't know if you get it, Heather. You have kids. You
Yep.
give to your work, you give to your spouse, you give to your job, you give to your kids, you give to your family, you give to your mom, you give. And then you realize no one's filling your cup.
Hmm.
It is. And you get to a point where you don't want to start having resentment, you know, around the world because you know what? No, how come no one is caring for you? No one is giving you what you're giving out. Life is not fair. It is. So I will tell you, for me, it was more like a reset, you
Mm.
know, reset where, prioritizing myself, love the people I love in my family. But you know what? It's that self care for myself and you know, what you want. And I also say, Heather, there's a season, isn't it? When the
Hmm.
kids are younger, and I'm talking from a mother's perspective, when the kids are younger, you can't be thinking about self-care, isn't it? It's about, you know what? They tell you put in the
Survival every day.
no, it is. But
Yeah.
you also want to be doing that work and making it because when it reaches that time for self care, I mean, you got to do it 24/7. You got to make that space for yourself so you can feed into your family. But when they're younger, you're in the dungeons, you're in the trenches. It is. You're in the trenches, and all of that doesn't happen. But as the kids get older, what I will really recommend is mothers or women change the gloves they're using. When I say changing the gloves, you can't just be a helicopter mom. You got to make sure we're making our kids grow self responsibility, self care, accountability, and just growing up, for when they're no longer going to be in your house, in your home. And this is something I'm always going to encourage, moms. I always say that I'm part of in my mosque, and what I say is we raise our kids not for us as mothers or parents. You raise your kids that when they leave the home where they have all the world and they're in the world is not going to treat them like we treat
Mm.
them
So
with
true.
love and excuses and, with I don't want to say excuses, where you're going to give them another chance. So one of the things I will tell, moms that are raising kids, it's raise them with love, raise them with support, raise them with guidance, but also raise them for when they're no longer that they can stand with their 2 feet solid without you worrying about who are they going to be? Is that person going to take advantage of them because you did not equip them with those survival skills to be out there? So I think, for me, those are one of the things I always think about. Um, for raising the kids. Don't raise them for you, raise them for the world.
I love that you said that earlier because it's so true. And that like just puts in perspective the work that we're doing with our children. You spoke to the woman who is in this world of raising children.
Mhm.
What advice do you have to them once their kids are a little more self-sufficient? They've stopped working for, 10 plus years to take care of their kids and now they're ready to like go back in the workforce. But there's this fear that if they put on a resume that they weren't working for 10 years, they're not worth anything, or they're like so hesitant to go back to work and then to find the work that they truly enjoy. What advice do you have for that woman listening that's stuck in that
I,
season?
I will tell you, Heather, I will tell you the hardest work. I think it's easier going to get a job than staying at home and raising your children.
Oh,
I will
yes.
say,
Yeah.
no, seriously, 100, 200%. I think, what, women that stay at home and raise the kids, it's the toughest job that is not being paid for. And I want every woman to know that I raise my hat off to women that stay at home and sacrifice to raise their children, honestly, and be there. It's not an easy feat. It's not easy because you know what? You're giving yourself 200% to something, to
Mhm.
your family. So what I will tell, women that have not been working and are going out there, don't think because you're raising your kids, you have a leadership skill, you know? No,
I would
seriously,
rather hire a woman who
not
just raised 3 children, that
you know
they've
what?
got skills for days.
You have skills, but also it's also the responsibility.
Yeah.
And able what they've had, it's like leadership, prioritization, focused on priorities, delivering. you know, and women don't think about that. And all you have to do is make that translation. Honestly, we've got ChatGPT right now, isn't it? We've got AI. Say these are all the things you do. Come, translate it into a role you're looking for, honestly, and it will create that for you. So I think, as my company grows, if I think I had to hire, I will always, women that have kids or stay at home women, because they're hungry to get into the workforce. They're not going to take it for granted. They're going to be there on time. They're going to deliver. They're going to meet everything, because you know what? That's how they've been wide running their mini organization, which is their family. So I think, for women like that, really that's one. But the other is also their opportunities. It's like it's building your confidence and not saying, oh, I was at home for 15 years, I raised my kids. Now I think what I will tell them, go back, look at all the accomplishments you've had see your family as a mini organization. That's what I want you to see it at. Seriously,
Yeah.
it's a small organization. Think about what the accomplishments are. Think about some of the things you have done in volunteer work. Honestly, those are part of you. Think you're just doing it. It's like if you were the chairperson, the lead, you are getting people together. So translation to that, you're a core team member, you're a core team lead, and you're having to deal with cross-functional partners. So I think what they have to do is make that translation applicable to the roles they're looking for,
Mm.
honestly. So that's going to be the one thing, I will say. And then it's also, sometimes, don't be shy with some of the friends you've made in your kids' soccer games. And this is something I tell my son. I tell him, my oldest son, he's going to be graduating right now from the University of Denver. And I tell him, you have friends, don't you? And sometimes you make friends, and some of the friendship, you also have to be thinking about what can they offer you? What are the things they have that you can reach out? You support each other. So if you have a friend, and I don't know if I'm being true, it's look about, what are their strengths? What are the networks they have? Because they tell you your network is your net worth. So look at the network they have, and it's not just about that you can tap into, and you have to be not shy, be and vulnerable to ask,
Yeah.
you know, to
Yeah.
ask, and not saying you're being needy. You just ask. People want to help, and if they can't help, they will say. But people generally want to help.
Yes.
People. That's one thing I will say. So I will say for women that have not been in the market, don't be shy. You have been running a mini organization for how many years? And what you have to look back is all the skills and some of the accomplishments you've had, and translate that as lateral, transferable skills to what you're looking for. And,
Yeah.
and and the other thing, Heather, I can say, right now you can take classes. That's the thing I always say. You can always be building up by taking, classes. We use credits, or you get a certification. It shows you that you're being open, that you're building yourself up, isn't it?
Yep.
The, that's the other thing I will say. It's like, you can go to the JC, take some certification, online classes, get a
There's
certificate.
so many things now. There's online courses, not even through like the JC or college, but just like out there in the world, or YouTube, or like whatever it is that you're kind of wanting to dabble into. Like do the research, find the YouTube videos, find the courses, go to the JC, like edge. Yeah, I love that. I think that's so important.
And we know right now is the advent of AI. Go get an AI thing. Make your I know, create a chat bot or something that it's addressing a need, a challenge. You understand?
Yeah.
I was having this conversation, and it's like, someone I was taking. I mean, LSR. I know. I was reading some of your podcast, listen to it, and you were talking about LSR, and I'm part of LSR 42, and I
Oh,
know
you are. Okay.
I am. So there was, a colleague of mine was saying, if you had to create an AI tool, we want a virtual assistant that can review through emails, and kind of prioritize what is important, what is not important, so people are not saying that we're slow in responding to you. So it's all those things. And I think, for for those moms is find out, you're sitting down, you're having conversations, you're listening to where there's an unmet need or there's a challenge. People are stuck in it. It's just difficult. It's just inefficiencies. And
Yeah.
tap into that and see how you can create something that can address that.
I love that. I
Yeah.
talk a lot about women wanting to like leave their career and go into entrepreneurship, which I do talk about that a lot. But
Mhm.
the last woman that I want to talk about as far as like being stuck in this, maybe it's a role that they're not happy with. But what I find in my community and just talking to women, they're in a corporate job and a 9 to 5, and they're working for a business and they have no desire to start a business, or, that's not a desire to them, but they are so miserable in their job. Their health has declined. There's no motivation. They're grinding. They're not like feeling fulfilled, but they don't want to leave, whether they're scared because they don't think they can get another job, or they're afraid to, walk away from something they've been so devoted to. Give that woman that's listening, that's stuck there. I like literally can see like three in my head of how do they move on to something better.
So I think the first thing I will say is, before you move on, I think what I will say is find a hobby
Mm,
outside of work. And you will find out most women don't have an escape outside of work,
mm,
outside of work or family. You got to find an escape where you know that you're bringing in something and then you're valued and your cup is being filled. And it doesn't have to be anything related to the kind of work you're doing. It could be volunteer in a retirement home. It could be volunteer where a nursery. It could be volunteer at your church. It could be volunteering at your mosque where they need people with your expertise in corporate, and you bring that in and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm having value in that space where the equal you can be a volunteer. Here, when I'm going to give an example for Seminole County, there are different kinds of commissions and boards. You sit on that, and then you're going to connect with different kind of people while you're kind of giving the lessons, your experience and your skills and your expertise, and you're giving it out there in a non pressure area, because you know what,
mm.
you're not being compensated. You're doing it because you love to do it.
Yeah.
People are not going to give you a performance evaluation, or tell you, but you're doing it from a place. So I think this is something I learned from me. It's sometimes you might need to have that escape, an alternate place where it's not their 9 to 5, where you can know you're bringing your value. Because I think what eventually happens, you think you're in that space, I don't feel I'm valued, I don't feel I'm recognized, and you get stuck. So
Mm,
over the weekend, you got to find other things where you're partnering, where you're involved, where you're leading, because that will fill your cup, and you go back and then you kind of mix it, you don't mix it up. So that is one. The other, it's also probably having a coach,
mm,
and sometimes people don't think about it. It will cost, but having a coach where you can really sit down and have those conversations, because sometimes you might find out probably who you are and what you're doing, they're not aligned. And
mhm,
you're always going to be having that conflict. And if you're doing that for all this amount of time, guess what? You're going to think, it's miserable, but you know what it is? You're not aligned to what you're meant to be doing. And people really need to know. We're all different, and you got to know it's like how you're being and how you were raised. There's going to always be a kind of career in which you're going to be good at. That
mhm.
it's going to be, you're going to do it. It's going to be like you're having fun. It's not going to be work. So those are part of the things I will say. You got to do that work. Identify, what your drive is, what your passion is, and then know if you're aligned to what you are meant to be doing. So it will be that one, having that conversation, having a coach, and having a roadmap on where you should be at, and or where you should be at, or how you transition to that path that will fulfill you. I think that's the one thing, I will say. But I will say one of the first initial step, find some volunteering things you do on the weekend. You know, meet people outside of work, because if work is the only thing you have, and you're not having a mix, you're just going to be stuck in that, because that's going to be, that will. But if you're mixing up, they tell you varieties the spice of life, isn't it? Mix it up.
I
Mix it
love
up.
that.
Meet different people.
Well, that's why I loved LSR. And for anyone who's local to Sonoma County, it's called Leadership Santa Rosa. It's like a 2-year program. It's wonderful. But I met so many amazing people that I've like now grown my network. But it's crazy because I was in class of 36. So we were like during the pandemic. So 6 years ago. Everybody who is in our group is literally doing something different. I don't think anybody is still in the same job that they were 6 years ago, because I think what that program, and I'm sure there's others out there like that, is you get to explore different industries, different companies, different opportunities, different nonprofits in our community to like get involved with and partner with. And I think that's, again, the beauty of getting involved with something other than your job and the things that can happen.
Heather, LSR has been amazing. I will tell folks, if you have an opportunity to get into Leadership Santa Rosa or Leadership Windsor or whatever, Leadership Petaluma, if they have it, have that. And the reason why I say that is I've been here in Santa Rosa since 2005. All right. When I came in here, I was an adjunct faculty at the JC, adjunct faculty at Sonoma State University, and then I started in Sonoma in Medtronic. And what I realized is sometimes we're just focused. I was heads down. It was raising my family. It was work. Those were the two things. Sports. I did not raise my head up to smell the rose about the community. How do things play? And this is what Leadership Santa Rosa does. It makes you understand the community, the different places, a criminal justice, and they bring all the leaders within those different spaces, and they come and give you a talk, and you get to understand and make the connection. But I think, Heather, what I love about it is you're not reading all, because we have social media, we have the news, they tell you all kinds of things, and everything it's a headline, isn't it?
Yep.
It's a headline, and if you don't have the critical thinking, guess what you're going to do? You're always going to take everything hook, line, and sinker, because they know how to work on people's, I think, anxiety, their stress, that you start panicking about things. So I think that's the one thing I will say. Leadership Santa Rosa, I'm not saying, it's perfect for me. I've met different people I will not meet in my entire life if I were still working in corporate. I'm meeting a CEO of a nonprofit Catholic, charities. I'm meeting a lieutenant in the police, SRDP. I'm meeting, right now an assistant city attorney, going to be this, the city attorney of Santa Rosa. So you meet a native Indian. So you meet different people across the board, and it also helps you in your thinking, that you're not thinking in once. You kind of start having a global way of thinking, Heather. I think for me, that's the one thing I will say I love about, Leadership Santa Rosa. And if anybody can, and I will encourage people, get it. It's highly competitive. You just don't get it. Yes. It's an interview. I was reading your podcast. You're gonna, you just don't, it's not for everybody. You're going to be
everyone.
You're going to be screened. You're going to be interviewed before you get it. So it is. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. I love having that conversation and the perspective too. So what is the work you're doing now? You're not in corporate. You alluded to a year ago you're doing your own thing. Tell us what you're doing now.
Okay, so what I've done is I started my own company. It's the founder and CEO of Shola Medical Consulting Group. What I do is I advise medical device companies on regulatory, clinical quality, and commercialization risk. And the other part I'm doing right now, it's part of the Shola, helping leaders make better decisions under pressure, and helping women understand. That's the other part. There's the technical piece and there's the people piece. And I think, for this particular forum, it's the people piece, which is currently being built here in, Santa Rosa, Sonoma County, which is the voice to value, where we get professional women come together. It's like, what I want to do, it's a leadership coaching, mentoring across a number of things. It's like your voice to value. How are you in a room and you're able to be comfortable in, speaking up without thinking that, what, I can't express, myself. So that's the part. It's in the work, it's being built. I think, once it's done, hopefully I can come again on another podcast and really share that, with your community members on how that is shaping up itself.
I love that. And I love that you're just like you're like taking different parts of things that you're passionate about. I mean, you were in like the medical field for so long and leadership, and then this passion for like coaching and like just everything you've said today resonates so well. And you're like creating this, experience for people that dabbles in all of your career journey.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is. And I think, what I think, and those are going to be part of the things, Heather, I will say is, you're dabbling in it, but then eventually, right now you got to give yourself, will find out which one's gonna, it is.
Yep.
And which, it is. And I think for me, part of the women part is I come from a family of 5 girls. So for me, that really, it's like, how do we empower women? How do we get that, tribe of sisterhood?
Yep.
And I think, for me, the most important thing for me, Heather, it's, sometimes we got to, if we've gone through it, we got to help other people not go through some of our mistakes, isn't it?
Yep.
They got to make different kinds of mistakes, not the ones we made. And that's part of, that's part of telling your story. It's like, I've been there. And sometimes some people have to make their mistakes to learn, but it is. So those are part of what I'm hoping to, the voice to value, in that sense.
I love that. I'm so excited that our worlds have collided. And I do think that I meet people certain days for certain reasons. And again, I'm continuing to build my community and my tribe and my women who support each other and want to support each other and connect people. And so that's what I love so much about the Sonoma County Women's Professional, but just women leading women and women doing good in our community. Like those are the people that I want to be around because they fill my cup as a mom and as a business leader. So
I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And I think sometimes some people are sent to your path. You're meant to meet them at a certain season. And I think for you, when you presented at SWP, I could just hear the authenticity in your heart. Really, it is. Sometimes you were speaking to my heart, and I walked up and I said, one person. So, and then again, you were very responsive. It wasn't like, you're responsive in your emails and your texts. It was like boom, boom, boom. We made it happen. I think we met in April, and this is under a month. We are making it happen.
we're making it happen.
We are making it happen.
I'm a doer, so I love doers in my community. I'm like, let's do it.
Let's do it. It is. Yeah. So I want to say thank you for the opportunity, have the opportunity to share my story with your community, honestly. So I can only say thank you very much.
I would love you to leave us with something you've learned along your journey, something that you wish you knew along your journey, just like one big pow moment that we can leave these women with today.
So I think, I think women should know you are not alone and you never feel you're not enough. And that's the thing I find out, we women, sometimes we isolate ourselves and we think it's only us it's happening to. You need to be in a community where you're having, conversations, vulnerable conversations, and then when you have those vulnerable conversations, people can say, oh, it happened to me. And then you feel affirmed that, well, it's not only me, isn't it? And I think also being able to use your voice and your judgment, and knowing that sometimes your judgment is not going to be, I want to say politically right, isn't it?
You're going to
So
hurt somebody. So,
you are.
yeah,
So it's going to be like, be your authentic self. That's one thing I'm going to say. Be your authentic self in a respectful and a mannerful way. I'm not saying be an authentic self being a jerk, being rude, being disrespectful, but be your authentic self, because you know what? You are going to be on your bed in the night, sleeping and ruminating, and you're going to say, you don't want to be going back thinking, I should have done this, I should have said this. At the end of the day, you said, I did it, you move forward, you don't look back and you step. So I think for me, that's going to be one thing I'm going to say. Be your authentic self, true to yourself, being respectful and mindful while you're being that. I think that's going to be one of the things I'm going to say.
I
And
love
lift
that.
up,
Love that.
yeah, that's it.
I love
Yeah.
that. Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad we connected. I can't wait to see what's next in your business and see you out and about. And thank you again for telling your story.
Heather, thank you very much. And I would love again when I launch the other women thing to come back in there and just share with women,
Yep.
honestly, what I've gathered, from the community of women, their feedback, where they're stuck in, and just, really empower people so they are not alone. Women are not alone in our thinking when we're left to our own selves, but you're part of a bigger, group in that sense. So thank you very much, Heather.
Thank
All right.
you. Have a wonderful day.
All right. You too. You take care. God bless. Bye-bye.